Hey, hey, welcome back to Miss F Spills the Tea, where we spill the piping hot historical gossip. Today, we're diving into the early court cases of the Civil Rights Movement. Oh, honey, the courtroom drama was real, and some of these judges were messier than a soap opera love triangle. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start with a little West Coast tea. Mendez versus Westminster. Picture it. California, 1947. Sylvia Mendez and her siblings were told they couldn't attend a white school and were shipped off to a so-called Mexican school instead. Oh, but Sylvia's parents weren't having any of that nonsense. They said, "Not today, segregation," and sued the school district. This case was groundbreaking because it was the first time a federal court declared school segregation unconstitutional. They said separate is not equal. Oh, and get this, Governor Earl Warren was in charge of California at the time. That's right, the same Earl Warren who would later become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and help bring down segregation nationwide. Talk about character development. Next up, we're headed to Texas for some university-level drama. Heman, Mary, and Sweatt wanted to get into the University of Texas Law School, but UT said, "Nah, we don't admit black students." Instead, they tried to make a separate black law school in a basement with no library and one full-time professor. Honey, they really thought they could pass off that Dollar Tree version of law school. The Supreme Court saw right through the nonsense and ruled that the separate school was not equal. This cracked the door open for challenging segregation in higher education. Oh, UT, you really tried it. All right, here's the one everyone's heard about. Brown versus the Board of Education. This is the Beyoncé of civil rights court cases. Honey, Linda Brown, a black third grader, had to walk through a railroad yard just to get to her segregated school when there was a white school much closer. Her dad, Oliver Brown, was not having it. This is when Thurgood Marshall said, "Time to break out the receipts." He argued that separate schools were inherently unequal because they made black children feel inferior. And guess who wrote the unanimous decision to end segregation? Chief Justice Earl Warren. Yes, the same Earl Warren from Mendez versus Westminster. He went from enforcing state law in California to tearing down segregation nationwide. That man really knew how to pull a plot twist. The Supreme Court said segregation in public school canceled. But did everyone comply? Oh, honey, not even close. Some folks held on to segregation like it was the last Birkin bag on sale. Oh, and don't sleep on Hernandez versus Texas. This one's a double shot of hot tea. Pete Hernandez was convicted of murder by an all-white jury in Texas. But here's the twist. Mexican Americans were considered white for jury selection, but were never actually allowed on juries. Make it make sense. Hernandez's lawyer said, "Nah, you can't have it both ways." The Supreme Court agreed and ruled that Mexican Americans were protected under the 14th Amendment. This case expanded civil rights to all racial and ethnic groups, not just black and white. And guess who the Chief Justice was on this one too? Yep, Earl Warren again. He was on a roll tearing down barriers. Oh, Texas was big mad about this one. But sometimes presidents don't wait around for Congress to get its act together. They just whip out that executive pen and say, "We're making history today." And that's exactly what happened when it came to early civil rights. Let's talk about some game-changing executive orders that paved the way for equality. First up, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, FDR was busy trying to win World War II, but he knew he needed black workers in the defense industry. Problem was, they were being shut out because of discrimination. A. Philip Randolph, a civil rights leader, went to FDR and basically said, "Listen, "We're going to march on Washington if you don't fix this." FDR was like, "Oh, no, you won't need to, not during the wartime." And just like that, Executive Order 8802 was born, banning discrimination in defense industry hiring. Philip Randolph didn't even need to march. That's power. Then came Harry Truman. Oh, and he did not come to play. After World War II, black soldiers came home ready to enjoy the freedom they fought for, but they were met with Jim Crow laws and segregation. Truman was furious. He was like, "These men risked their lives for this country, and y'all are really out here treating them like second-class citizens?" So in 1948, he signed Executive Order 9981 to desegregate the military. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but Truman planted the seeds for a fully integrated armed forces. Go on, Harry. But the most iconic executive moment? That would be Dwight D. Eisenhower and the Little Rock Nine. After Brown versus the board said that schools must integrate, Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus showed his true colors. He stood in the schoolhouse door. Not literally, that was George Wallace, but he did call in the National Guard to stop 9 black students from entering Little Rock Central High. Now, he wasn't having it like that. He picked up the phone and called the U.S. Army to escort these students to class. Imagine needing an entire army to get to school. But those kids were brave, and they walked into that school with soldiers by their side. Talk about historic. Oh, and now we have to talk about the governors who were just doing the most to keep schools segregated. Let's start with Orville Faubus from Arkansas. Honey, this man did everything but stand on his head to block integration. When Eisenhower sent the U.S. Army, Faubus backed down, but he stayed bitter about it. And then there's George Wallace from Alabama, the king of petty. In 1963, he stood in the doorway of the University of Alabama, blocking 2 black students from registering. With cameras rolling, he gave his famous speech, "Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." Y'all, he really thought he did something. But then President Kennedy sent in the National Guard, and Wallace had to step aside, looking all kinds of defeated. I would feel bad, but nah. These 2 men thought they could stop progress, but history showed them otherwise, and we're better for it. Woo! This tea was piping hot today, from Sylvia Mendez breaking barriers in California to Earl Warren's glow up from governor to Chief Justice. These early civil rights cases and executive orders set the stage for a movement that changed America. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next episode. Until next time, keep spilling that tea. Historically speaking, of course. Bye.